So because of the time, I think we should get started. We have other people joining us. I know we will have hopefully more people coming and attending our webinar today. I want to say a warm welcome to everyone. I'm Jeannie Darling from Cornell Cooperative Extension, Executive Director. And I also chair the Delaware County Rural Health Care Alliance. We want to welcome everyone to our Growing Resilience in Uncertain Times webinar series, sponsored by Cooperative Extension, Cornell Cooperative Extension in Delaware County, and the Delaware County Rural Health Care Alliance. And I'd like to begin by thanking the team of people who have supported and put this webinar together, starting with the ACEs Task Force, which is part of our Rural Health Care Alliance in Delaware County. They really identified the topic and really actually helped me connect to Child Savers, which is a great a connection for us. And we'll hope to grow that connection in the future. We want to also thank Cooperative Extension staff in Delaware County and in Orange County for supporting and publicizing the conference. The Catskill Health Network here, our Rural Health Network. Cooperative Extension has certainly a network across the state. We want to welcome everybody from that network. The Catskill Teachers Center, and certainly the organization that is going to be presenting the workshop today, Child Savers. Please join us every second Thursday of the month from February through May to participate in more exciting resilience webinars, which will be recorded and available on Cornell Cooperative Extension's Delaware County's website as soon as edits are made. We want to thank everybody also after the workshop for completing the online evaluation. When you do that, you complete your survey, you will actually receive a certificate, and you will actually know how to go to get your teacher credits for attending the webinar, each webinar. We have a large audience today, so please mute yourself, turn off your video. You can add your questions to the chat and enjoy the presentation. We have a resilience challenge for you to do, and we will be actually doing that at each one of our webinars, so you can actually apply what you learned today and in each webinar that we present. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our presenter for each webinar, John Richardson Love. John is a licensed clinical social worker with over 25 years of experience working in the field of community mental health. John is the Director of Mental Health and the lead trauma and resilience educator at Child Savers, an outpatient mental health clinic which has served children and families in the Richmond, Virginia community for over 90 years. He and his wife have a 13-year-old son and have worked with over 50 children in foster care in their home. So John really practices what he is teaching, which is really wonderful. And we want to thank John for being with us today and with each webinar. And we look forward to his presentation. So I'm going to let John take it away. I'm sure he'll repeat some of the things I've already told you. But you know, we really are happy to welcome John. John is from the state of Virginia, and we're really anxious to learn from you, John. And we thank you for being part of our New York State webinar series.
Thank you so much, Jeannie. It's definitely a privilege to be here with all of you and to be able to take this trip up north for me down here in Richmond, Virginia. Although last time I was talking to Karen as we were preparing for this, it seemed like the weather there and the weather here were pretty much the same. But I think that you all have much better views than I do in Richmond, Virginia. Definitely happy to be here with you today. We're going to spend the hour today talking about self-care. Which is when we decided to put this one together, or put this series together. We decided to start off with that. So many of us are really in need of good self-care these days, given all the different layers, and it seems like all those layers of complexity in our lives get more complicated day by day. So we're going to dive into that over the next hour. Here on the screen is my contact information if anybody would like it. It'll be on the last slide that I shared too. But more importantly, on the bottom there is a website link. We're going to have Karen, I'm going to ask Karen to email this out with follow-up email as well. But that link there, childsavers.link/Cornell, if you want to scribble that down, take a screenshot of it. That link will bring you to a couple different things. One, a PDF of this entire presentation. So everything you see on the screen, you'll get access to. And then 2 other tools that we will review as we talk together today. So that said, we do have a wonderful large audience. We have 163 people in addition to me who are on today. That's super exciting. A lot of opportunity for interaction, not a lot of opportunity for conversation. It would be really difficult to have those conversations as we go through today. So we do have the chat, which you can put things in, and I'll ask you to connect with that in just a minute. But right now, I'm going to ask you if you have a phone or if you want to open up a new browser window on your computer, this is a way that we can interact in some live polling, which I really enjoy doing. So if you can't figure it out, don't worry, don't stress. There's no grade for this. Don't stress about that. But if you can log into this live polling in one of 3 ways. You can get out your phone and you can text the word Child Savers, all one word, to the number 22333. And make sure that a lot of autocorrect will separate that word Child Savers and put a space in between. And if you do that, you'll be in somebody else's poll. But if you do it right, you'll get a response text that says something to the effect of welcome to John Richardson Loves Poll or welcome to the Child Savers poll. And then you'll be able to text in responses to the questions that we'll get into. Or you can open up a browser window on your phone, your iPad, your computer, and go to the website pollev.com/childsavers. Or you can take a picture of this QR code that's on the screen, and that will take you to that same page. So those instructions will be at the top of every slide where we have live participation opportunities. Again, if you can't figure it out, if you're not able to make it work, do not stress about it. You'll just be able to sit back and watch everyone else's responses. So that said, a practice slide here. What is one new hobby that you picked up during COVID? So you have the opportunity to text in or type in a response to this, and it'll show up on the screen here for everyone to see. If you have a multiple word phrase, like if you say running every day, either slam it together, put a hyphen or an underscore to make sure that it stays as one word. Otherwise, it'll, like bread baking, would show up as 2 completely separate words. So you folks, you got this. You got this in your back pocket. See, I see the word homeless there, and I have no idea what that's connected to because it was part of a multiple word phrase. Hopefully being homeless was not a hobby you picked up during COVID. Jam making, gardening, puzzles, the bigger the word, the more people have submitted that as a response. Puzzles, skincare. That's some good self-care as well as a good hobby. Crocheting, somebody's making robots. Somebody's doing words with friends. Strength training, I wish I was still working out. I think I gave that up in October. And decided my body was going to be what it is. But we'll talk about that as a self-care tool. You folks are awesome. Somebody's doing TikTok videos. If you want to post a link to your TikTok in the chat, we will all go take a look at that after the workshop. I see a lot of people responding in the chat as well, which is great. Home repairs, bread baking, juicing. Oof. I used to do some juicing, gourmet cooking, quilting, remodeling, walking every day. Excellent. So you folks totally got the hang of this. Again, you see the instructions there at the top. I'm going to move on to the next question, and this is a multiple choice where you can choose what you want to how you want to respond. How many workshops have you been in for self-care? The answers are way too many, definitely not enough. Some, but I'm really looking forward to this one today. None, or at least I wasn't paying attention when I did. I can always use more, love me some self-care workshops, or the last option, a bunch, but you wouldn't know it based on how I feel. Depends on what kind of profession you're in. I feel like I'm a clinical social worker, and it seems like when I go to conferences, there's always workshops on self-care, and it's really based on my mood, whether I want to lean into that or not. But self-care workshops can run the gamut, and it's really about you as an individual in terms of what works for you. We get a lot of responses. I really appreciate everybody responding. That gives me a flavor, and I'm glad that people are looking forward to one today. That's great, because you're here and you're stuck with me. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is just a who's in the room. You've already been doing this in the chat, but if you haven't already, please put your name, your workplace, and your role in the chat. If you haven't already, that'll give us an idea of who's in this virtual room all together. I spend a lot of my time pre-COVID traveling around the country, doing trainings and workshops and keynote presentations, things like that. I love doing it. I'm really sad that we're not all together in the same room. But as Jeannie mentioned earlier, we have the opportunity to have so much wider and greater impact and diversity in this. I've been doing a lot of my community workshops lately that I'll put on Eventbrite. And I've had people from Canada, from the UK, Ireland, Germany, from Oman and Malaysia. I was in a workshop on Tuesday this week with somebody from Malaysia who stayed on until 4 a.m. her local time, Australia, all sorts of great places. So thank you for putting those in the chat. That lets us all know who's in the room, what kind of workplaces, and we're going to record the chat as well, and we'll be able to use that to inform our future workshops too. So our topic for today is about self-care. You know, we all have good days. We all have our smiley days. We all have our happy days, which are good. And those we need to engage in good self-care during those days too. Self-care is not just something for when you're down and out. Self-care is also something for the good days too. We're going to talk about self-care, and we're going to define self-care in a bit. We all sadly have bad days. And those are the days that we really need those self-care practices as well. We all have our rotten days, our stinky days, our challenging days. And again, a lot of us have those days more often now than we have in the past because of things that are going on in our society, our community, our world, which are many, a myriad of them, depending on your perspectives and your situations. But we all have our rough days. I do want to point out that we all might be having a good day ourselves, but maybe somebody around us is not having a good day. All of you who are educators, who work in social services, people who you work in healthcare, you might have these encounters more often than others, but all of us have these moments where we experience someone who's experiencing vicarious trauma. And vicarious trauma, or secondary traumatic stress, goes by a lot of different names. We're not going to have a workshop today on that topic, but it is important to realize that our self-care is something that makes us strong when we experience vicarious trauma too. I do want to mention that because vicarious trauma is something that we oftentimes don't think about. Vicarious trauma is the secondary. It's what we call the trickle-down trauma, that I didn't experience the trauma directly. If I'm a teacher in a classroom, I know many of you are teachers. If I'm a teacher in a classroom and a kid is yelling at me, cursing at me, throws a chair at me, that's direct trauma. That is primary trauma. But if I'm an individual who sits down with this young man here who's had something bad happen to him, whatever that might be, the secondary trauma is that trickle down of that trauma. It's the trauma that I experienced by listening to this young man's stories, by listening to his stories, because I have to be a cup, I have to be a vessel for his story if I want to be effective in terms of helping him heal, helping him grow, helping him to resolve his issues, helping him to learn, helping him to feel less alone, helping him to feel safe. In order to do that, I have to be a holding vessel for his trauma, for his experience. And that means he has to be able to pour that into me, which means I got to be strong enough to deal with that. And that vicarious trauma is what kind of mixes me up on the inside and might tear me apart, might make me struggle too. And that's why we need, again, good self-care practices, why that's vitally important. So what is self-care? Self-care is most foundationally something that you do for you. I think about that and I really want to highlight that. People in my workplace, I am the director of an outpatient mental health clinic, and we used to have in our culture and climate in our workplace, we used to have people who all the times, our clinicians would say, I need the organization to be more invested in my self-care. And there's a framing problem there. People can support me in my self-care. People can make sure that they're not interrupting me during my meditation time or my exercise hour or whatever that might be, and make sure that they support me in my self-care. But it's important to remember that self-care is about what I do for me. It's not about what other people do for me. That's different. Self-care is about what I do for me, the choices that I make to support my own self. So important that it's a self-actualized, self-focused, and self-started topic. So self-care is what I do for me. Secondarily, it is about what works for you. I use this phrase, variation is the norm, because what works in terms of self-care for one person might be very different than what works for self-care for others. We're going to give some opportunity in a bit for folks to talk about what does work for you. But think about yourself. Are you someone who, for your self-care, for your regulation activity, are you someone who needs to upregulate, or are you someone who needs to downregulate? That is to say, are you somebody whose self-care is going to involve the yoga and the mindfulness and the meditation and the deep breathing and the quiet time? My wife and I were talking at lunch today as I was finishing up this PowerPoint, and she said, I like to go take a bath. And me going and taking a bath isn't just about getting clean, and it's not just about soothing my skin and feeling good in the tub. She said, quite frankly, it's about being alone. She said it's about spending time alone. She really likes to down-regulate in her self-care. Me, on the other hand, I'm someone who oftentimes likes to upregulate. Things like yoga and mindfulness and meditation aren't really my shtick for the majority of time. What I like to do when I engage in self-care, I'm more likely to upregulate. I'm more likely to upregulate, to be able to connect in with things like whether it's dancing, whether it's exercise. Somebody put in our word cloud, running, strength training, things like that. I want to get energy in. I want to fill up with energy as opposed to down regulate. So again, it's about what works for you. And this character here on the screen who's spinning plates, that might look really horrible for some people. But for somebody like me, that looks like a new skill to master. That looked like an awesome opportunity to gain some mastery and competence over a new skill. And that might really help my self-care. Third here, self-care is both a lifestyle and an event. What I mean by that is it's something that we do. It is something that I do today. Today, I'm going to engage in self-care by stopping my work today and going and taking a lunch break, by making sure that I'm eating healthy and nutritious food, and that I'm taking that break and getting away from my computer screen. That's the event of self-care. But self-care also is a lifestyle. It's something that we need to weave into all that we do so that we make sure that it's not just a series of disparate events, but it is opportunities for us to really engage in that self-care, to connect with that, and make sure that it's programmed in to what we do. So what do you do for your own self-care? Another opportunity to put some word cloud in here. Fortunately, there's no, well, there might be some right or wrong answers. We'll see. Somebody might go way off the rails here. But I want you to think about, know that your answers are anonymous. That's what I'm trying to say. Know that your answers are anonymous. So whatever you put here, nobody knows who put it there. Okay. I'm going to step and grab my glass of water. I feel my throat itching while people put their things up there. Great. You folks so much have the hang of this. Outdoor walks, tea time, walks and baths. Again, the bigger the word, the more it's been submitted. We have a lot of exercising, reading, baths, music. You must have a better bathtub than me because I'm not taking a bath in my bathtub. Knitting, binge watching Hulu. Think about that, binge watching Hulu. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes. Listening to music, gym, hikes. These word clouds that we're creating, I'm also going to take snapshots of them and put them in that Google Drive folder based on that link that I shared earlier. So you will be able to go back and look at these. Great, 110 responses. Excellent. Unplugging, baking, manicures, great. Skiing, reading. Oh, Corinne gave me some props there. She said, a way to lead by example and attend to my own needs by getting my water. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you noticing that. Definitely, we need to do that. All right. I'm going to cut you off there and move forward. So big complicated definition here. We're going to take this and operationalize it in a little easier way. But it is interesting that the World Health Organization took the time to define what it means for self-care. And that's a pretty cool thing, I think. This definition fits into two parts. One, self-care is something you do for yourself. And here they define it as something that maintains your health and prevents and deals with illnesses. Now that's interesting. It maintains and prevents. Maintains and prevents. And it can be operationalized in how we deal with our hygiene, nutrition, lifestyle, environmental factors, socioeconomic factors, self-medication. So there's all sorts of different ways. They're really acknowledging here that there's all sorts of different ways that an individual can engage in self-care. So some categories for self-care: distraction and escape, and restoration. Distraction and escape is would be binge watching Hulu. Distraction and escape would be sitting down and blowing a number of hours on a PlayStation game or a video game, things like that. I'm going to argue that distraction and escape is not self-care. Okay, I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's bad at all. There are times that we really need to distract and escape. But remember that definition of self-care is that self-care works to maintain and prevent. Okay, maintain and prevent. And then the restorative kind of things are the things that make us stronger. Okay, the things that heal wounds that have happened and make us stronger. I'm going to argue that that doesn't quite fit in this category of self-care either. Those are things that we need to do, most definitely, but they're not things that are actually going to fit into this category of self-care. Because I don't want to have to focus on restorative behaviors and restorative practices on a daily basis. Self-care should be something that doesn't change based on how good or bad my day is. Self-care is I'm going to stop for lunch, and I'm not going to stop for lunch just because I skipped breakfast. I'm going to stop, that would be the restorative. I'm going to stop for lunch because it's something that's programmed into my day, and I know that I need to do it. Whether I had breakfast or not, whether I have a full belly or an empty belly, it's something that I know that I'm going to put in my schedule, that at noon, I'm going to stop what I'm doing. I'm going to step away from my computer, and I'm going to go take some time and take some time for myself for that. So not really distraction and escape, not really restorative. It's more something that, again, maintains. It maintains and it prevents. It maintains us at the strength that we are, most hopefully, and it works on preventing the potential future problems that might occur. We have these interesting concepts of self-care, and then we also have co-care. Co-care is what my employees were asking for when they were asking for the agency to help them with their self-care. Co-care or community care is when we work together to lift someone up. Is when I'm having a rough day and someone comes and puts their hand on my shoulder and says, "Hey, John, you're having a rough day. Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to spend some time together? What can I do to help you?" Co-care is what we do either directly in relationship or outside of, not in relationship directly in the moment, but in the systems that we create and what we do with them. Co-care is that. Co-care is not self-care because it's someone else doing it to me. Self-care is what I do for myself. So self-care helps us maintain our own health and works on preventing problems. This is a good way to conceptualize. So if I'm working at baseline, if I'm working at my baseline level of functioning, that's where I want to be and that's where I want to stay. So I want to be able to function like that with that baseline functioning. We all have moments of stress or trauma, whether that's vicarious trauma or direct trauma, that knocks us off our feet. And that changes, that makes me go below baseline in terms of my functioning. It means I'm having a hard day, right? It means life's rough. And then it's self-soothing and restoration that brings me back up to baseline, not self-care. Remember, self-care is not what we do to deal with the stress and the trauma. Self-care is what we do to maintain, to prevent, to keep me on that strong, on that plateau of baseline. But then I drop down below because of stress and trauma, and then I have to get back up. And I get back up through those self-soothing behaviors, through the restorative behaviors. That's that Band-Aid that I put on when I have an injury to help me heal. And I go back up. The International Self-Care Foundation came out of that World Health Organization definition of self-care. And that is created these 7 categories. Now, these are, look at it from a global perspective. What we usually think of when we think of self-care, we think of the physical and psychological things. So that would be categories 2 and 3. And we just overarchingly put everything in this mental well-being and physical activity category. But it definitely involves a lot of other things too. And if you're ever working with self-care, particularly with our young ones in our community, ourselves too, or anyone who has struggles with making good choices, we can look at those other categories, things like category 5 there, risk avoidance, that putting on my bicycle helmet or my seatbelt, those are things that are self-care. Those are taking care of myself, making sure that I'm making good choices about alcohol use, about tobacco use, about drug use, things like that. Those are risk avoidance kind of activities. Good hygiene. And think about now how much even more we're washing our hands and making sure that we're keeping ourselves safe from germs and viruses and bacteria and pathogens. That number 6, that is about our self-care. That when I go out to the grocery store and I come back home, and the first thing I do is I wash my hands when I get back in the house. And that is number 6 there. That is my good hygiene practice. So this is a good way that we can operationalize these additional categories. And particularly if you have someone who is on a lower functioning level that you're working with, someone who is struggling with that, if we're trying to help them with their self-care, we can celebrate all these different levels and take our self-care and operationalize it, break it down based on all these different levels, all these different layers, 1 through 7 here. So we're not going to dive too much into this in terms of self-care, but I did want to present it most importantly because, again, there is an International Self-Care Foundation. And if you Google that, you can find this, and it does operationalize each one of these. They have a self-care manifesto or self-care pledge, and they also have a deep dive into each one of these and how it plays out. So how do we build a self-care plan? Self-care plan, the elements of the self-care plan should first and foremost be achievable and realistic. If my self-care plan is to, or my self-care activity is to go skiing, but I live in Richmond, Virginia, and it is a long way to go to get to the ski slopes, then that is not a realistic part of my self-care plan because I'm not going to be able to do it on a regular basis. And that goes to the next one here. It needs to be accessible. It needs to be something that I can get to, something that I can achieve. Good self-care should be able to be something that I can get to at any moment. When we talk about self-care plans and resiliency plans, which is even a bigger layer there, we talk about that it needs to be something that an individual can access at any time. So that self-care plan needs to be something that my 17-year-old can access while they're working behind the counter at McDonald's. Because if their self-care plan is to take a walk, they can't do that in the middle of their workday. So hopefully they have tools that they can use for their own maintenance and prevention on a regular basis, on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, while they're in their workplace. Things simple like deep breathing. Those are tools, coping tools that can be built into a self-care plan. Self-care plan should have elements that are big and elements that are small. The big elements might be going skiing. That might be, I'm going to take a vacation once a year and I'm going to go out to the Catskills, I'm going to go out to the Poconos, and I'm going to have a great week of skiing. And I'm going to really enjoy that. I'm going to dig into that. And that's part of my self-care plan that I do on an annual basis. But it should also be small operational things that I can operationalize on a regular basis, again, that are achievable, realistic, and accessible. So things that I can do on a daily basis. Again, like stopping and eating lunch, like going to bed at a reasonable time, like making sure that I turn off the screens an hour before I go to sleep and turn out the lights. Self-care plans should be balanced. And by balanced, I mean the balance of the big and the small, a balance of the accessible and the harder to access. And they need to be balanced and right for you. A good self-care plan is going to involve the opportunity for that individual to have it individualized for them. Like I said before, yoga might work for some people, but yoga don't work for everybody. And many people would be even more dysregulated. They would be less regulated. They would have a harder time functioning if we said we're all going to have a yoga class. And my employer might think that inviting everybody to yoga might be the best thing in the world. And my employer is being so nice to everybody by doing that and giving such a great gift. But that might not be the right fit for everybody. So those are the elements of building out a self-care plan. And then we have to look at the different elements, the different categories. We're going to spend some time brainstorming together what these are. So I like to operationalize it by thinking of these 6 categories. And this is similar to the 7 pillars from earlier, but these are a little more realistic and fitting for most of us, I believe. So we have a self-care plan element that has to be physical. My physical, how much I'm taking care of my body, whether I'm exercising, whether I'm getting movement in. Many of you can see that I'm at a standing desk right now, and this is how I present and do most of my work during the workday, and that's part of my physical health. During the month of July, I decided to, and I don't know whether this was good self-care or not, I decided to run a lot, and I set a goal of running 150 miles over the course of July. Or no, it was August. And then during the following month, I didn't run at all because I was tired. And that was my self-care plan for that month, was to take a break. So we all need these physical self-care plans, how we take care of ourselves, what our body needs, and how well we're listening to our body's needs. And the self-care plan that is right for you this month might not be right for you next month. Psychological, our mental health self-care plan, that's what I'm doing to, for instance, take time away from the computer screen, to make sure that I'm avoiding conflictual situations, to make sure that I'm doing what I need to do to be in the right headspace and heart space, that's psychological and emotional, when I'm engaging with people. That if I have a colleague at work or a person that I serve in the workplace or in the community, or maybe a superior at work, maybe it's my boss, where there's that conflict, I need to make sure that I step away from that conflict as much as I can, or lean into it and ask for help. That's psychological and emotional, mental, or self-care. And that's about what we're doing for our heart as well, what we're doing for our emotions. Whether I'm listening, a lot of self-care is about listening. Whether I'm listening to my emotional needs, whether I'm listening to my needs for connection, my needs for self-expression. A lot of us are carrying around these burdens these days because of COVID-19, because of social and physical isolation, because of the lack of opportunity to be with other people. And we have to find ways to get that out. Levels of therapy and counseling access have gone up significantly in many communities because people are finally listening to the burdens that they're carrying in what we call your invisible backpack. All those things, those psychological and emotional burdens that I'm carrying in my invisible backpack that weigh me down, that burden me in the course of my daily life. Next is spiritual self-care. What am I doing for my own spiritual self-care? And whether you believe in a higher power or not, whether you have your own faith practice, that's separate from the spiritual self-care. What am I doing for my own spirit? What am I doing to nourish my own spirit and my spiritual connections? How am I engaging with that in a meaningful way? Relationships are pretty obvious. Relationships and connections with other people is definitely part of self-care. And relationships has to do with how well we're connected with ourselves. Again, that listening to myself, making sure I have that self-insight, how well I'm connected with other people as well. And that doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, we all need those relationships. We as human beings are hardwired for connections. We're hardwired for those connections. And so the relationships need to be a part of that self-care plan. And that means that we might need to write someone else into my self-care plan. My self-care plan might involve me writing into my self-care plan that I'm going to make sure that I have a date night every week with my wife or partner. It might mean that I write that in as part of the plan, which means that she has to be willing to do that. Then a workplace self-care elements, that has to do with how well I'm advocating for myself, how well I'm working on my own competence and confidence and self-esteem in my workplace, how well I'm achieving my goals and setting those goals, how well I'm standing up for myself within my workplace, standing up for what I need, expressing my needs, and hopefully being validated and appreciated and listened to and attended to in terms of the needs that I have. So building that self-care plan is a thing that we can do. All of us think about our self-care. We think about, yeah, self-care is important and I'm going to take a break for lunch. And if I take a break for lunch, that's going to be good self-care. But it can be really useful, whether it's for you or whether it's for somebody that you help and teach and serve, to actually operationalize that self-care plan, to put that on paper. Oops, apologies. So I want to share with you, in that Google Drive folder is this worksheet. And this worksheet is a self-care worksheet that you can use, and you can blow this up and use all the paper that you want. But this helps us to operationalize that physical, psychological, emotional, spiritual, relationships, and workplace self-care elements. It's a good way to write it down. And it's a good way to hold yourself accountable too. I would argue that even better would be to have an accountability partner in this, to have an accountability partner where somebody else is going to help me to maintain my accountability. And then down at the bottom there, we have some other questions, which we'll get to in just a second. So now that we've gone through that, I want to invite you to talk about these elements, these self-care elements. What are some things that you can or already do? Let's focus on physical and psychological self-care. Let's just focus on those two categories and give some response here, either in the chat or on the word cloud. What are some things that you can or already do to support your physical and psychological self-care? I like how those two lined up. Bath therapy. Hydrate, most definitely. Horseback riding. There's a lot of good research and techniques about equine therapy, which is horseback riding or being with horses, and the intuitive nature of horses. I don't know if horseback riding was a physical or a psychological self-care. Doesn't really matter. Reading, working out, attending therapy. Therapy is a big one there. Therapy is winning. Journaling. Journaling is a wonderful thing because journaling is about self-expression to yourself. You are both the giver and the receiver. But even in something as simple as journaling, what we do know and what's intuitive for us is when I talk to a therapist, when I talk to my significant other, when I talk to a friend, things are a little less scary when they're on the outside than when they're on the inside. So we tend to like to get them out. It's no different than a kid. Young kid might have a traumatic experience, might have a stressful experience, and they might draw a picture about it, might do a drawing or a coloring about it. It's the same thing. It's less scary when it's on the outside than when it's on the inside. And journaling or writing in my diary is the same thing. Praying to God is the same thing. Looking for those connections in order to have that physical and psychological self-care. Dog care, therapy still winning, exercise and sleeping, meditating. Meditating, again, is a wonderful down-regulating type of self-care activity. Meditating, mindfulness, yoga. Gabrielle likes that therapy is the biggest word. Coloring and cooking. Nicole says she takes baths for her mental health and she's not afraid to tell everyone that she does. Gardening, exercise, long walks, the treadmill. Great answers. Thank you all for participating and putting all these up. I want to leave it up here for another moment or two because I want to challenge you to think about other things to put on this list. What are some innovative things that you might not have thought about, that you might not have intuitively done before? Maybe not the list of things you can and already, or things you already do, but things that you could do if you're in physical and psychological self-care. I recently got myself one of these massage guns that just hammers you, that I've really been enjoying. Unfortunately, my wife wants nothing to do with it, so my back doesn't get massaged with it. I need a post-COVID massage friend who can use that on me. Trampoline. Marguerite is trampolining. That's awesome. It's interesting with all a number of things, obviously with COVID-19 and social isolation and shutdown that's happened over the past 10 months or so. There's a lot that keys into psychological self-care that we've leaned into, things like bread baking. And that's about where I want to feel confident and competent. I want to feel like I have something to contribute in the world. I want to feel like I'm doing something and I'm accomplishing something. So learning how to bake bread or putting together a garden, home improvements, things like that, scrapbooking, arts and crafts hobbies. Those are ways that people really leaned into and started doing many more of specifically because they weren't able to be in their workplace. They weren't able to have the impact and the good feelings that they had created in that. So they were looking for that in different ways of that sense of accomplishment. Excellent. All right, we're going to move to the next slide. And so pause on putting any in, because I would hate for your response to go in the wrong one. The next is your emotional and spiritual self-care, things that you can do or things that you already do. What would be on your wish list? If you were making this self-care plan right now, what would you put on it for your emotional and spiritual self-care? Affirmations. Thelma is listening to her inner child. Don't let your inner child grow up too big though, Thelma, because it's good to have that inner child. Don't let them grow up. Reading scripture, time with spouse, writing poetry, meditation, definitely. Meditation helps us slow down. It's that down regulating force that helps us to be able to slow down. Cathartic crying, riding a bicycle. I like the cathartic crying. I really like that for emotional health. Unplugging, gratitude. I love gratitude. Gratitude is definitely part of my resilience plan that I feel like we all need to have gratitude built in there. There's a whole science of gratitude called positive psychology that has a lot of research that says gratitude is healing for both the giver, when I say thank you to you and express gratitude, and for the receiver. Time with loved ones, FaceTiming with, I think that was grandkids. Praying, excellent. Time outside, playing games. Spending time with pets, definitely. Pets, particularly pets that are attuned to us, that are connected to us. There's a great emotional healing that happens in that reciprocity. When my dog knows that I'm sad and comes and cuddles with me on the couch, when my dog knows that I need that, there's some real magic in that. And that's part of that attunement and reciprocity. Prayer at church. Great stuff. Give it another moment for this. Okay. We'll go ahead and pause this. You can pause your responses for a second. And we're going to go to the last one where we're going to brainstorm these self-care activities. And that is, what are some specific self-care things that you can do or already do for your relationship? Or, and this is the challenging one to really wrap your head around, your workplace self-care. Having good time management at work, definitely. Having boundaries, a positive mindset. I like that. I like that a lot. Being assertive, being appropriately assertive with the people who have expectations for you. Date night. It's kind of weird how this relationship and workplace are in the same category. This is kind of fun. Saying no, talking with friends, not taking on more than you can do in one day. Chatting with faculty and staff to catch up. Expressing appreciation of others. That's a great workplace self-care. I'm less likely to be annoyed by the people in my workplace if I appreciate them for who they are and what they have to contribute. Boundaries is definitely winning there, and boundaries could be a relationship and a workplace self-care activity. Blue light blocking glasses. White noise can be a good way to kind of isolate. Donna likes laughing with her husband. Oh, not sure what happened there. That was odd. Donna likes laughing with her husband. I'm sure that that's not laughing at your husband. Date night check-ins, happy hour. I miss my happy hours with work colleagues. Snuggle time. You folks are wonderful with this. Giving love abundantly. I like that. And that could be a workplace activity as well as a relationship activity. Good answers. I think the system got overwhelmed. We had so many. Oops. All right. We're going to go ahead and move on from that one. We have about 15 minutes left in our time today. And I do want to give a little bit of time for questions. As we finish up with this one, if anybody wants to put anything left remaining here, if you have any questions or insights that you want to share, revelations, comments, we have a lot of people here, so we might not be able to get to, it'll depend on how many people want to talk. but you can do one of two things, or one of three things maybe, if you want to share. You can put something in the chat if you want. We got a lot of stuff going on in the chat, and it might be difficult for me to keep track of that. If you're willing to verbally share any comment or insight or self-revelation, something like that, you can raise your hand, which you can do either in the bottom right-hand corner of your participants tab, or depending on how recently you've updated your Zoom client, in the reactions tab, there should be an option for raise hand, and that'll put you to the top of my participants tab and let me see that you have something to say. And also, you could just unmute yourself. Hopefully you're in a quiet environment, but if you unmute yourself, you'll go to the top of my participants tab if you want to share. So I have a few more things that I want to share, but if you want to think about, if you have any, again, comments, revelations, insights, practices that you just want to brag about with your own self-care. So we talked about, I'll go back here, building a self-care plan. We had these 5 or 6 elements, which we just went through. Also, in terms of building a self-care plan, what's on that worksheet down towards the bottom are 2 questions. One, what would life be like if you were doing these things? It's good to conceptualize, if I stop what I'm doing and go take my lunch at noon on a daily basis and do that, how will my life be different? Well, my afternoon might be more productive because at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm not getting all hungry. And I'm also not going and snarfing potato chips as a quick snack and eating those while I sit here at my workstation because my belly's nice and full from a healthy, balanced lunch. And that's going to affect my health. It's going to affect my mood. It's going to affect how I feel, things like that. So it's good to articulate what would life be like if you do these things, to actually write these down, because that's kind of your goal. This is what I want to get to. If I'm engaging in this, if I'm engaging in exercise, if I'm promising myself that I'm going to go to my CrossFit class or go to the gym or go outside and take a walk or a run 4 times a week, then what will life be like if I do these things? Well, my blood pressure will be less. My heart rate will be, resting heart rate will be more healthy. My doctor won't give me a hard time when I go in for my physical next time, or he'll give me less of a hard time. I'll be able to be a stronger person. I'll be able to feel better about myself. I'll sleep better at night. That's the answer to that. What would life be like if I was doing these things? And then what are barriers that you can anticipate in these activities? What are some hard things? Well, if my commitment is to go outside for a run 4 times a week, barriers might be that during bad weather, whether that's the wintertime or a rainy week, that might be a challenge for that. Barriers that I can anticipate in the workplace from being assertive, well, my boss is a jerk and it's really hard to be assertive, and I might have the goal of being assertive, but I might get shouted down. I might not be able to be assertive about my own needs. I might end up having to transition into a different workplace or within the workplace in order to achieve that self-care goal. So we have to make realistic assessments about what barriers we might encounter. So we have self-care. We need to engage in self-care. Remember, self-care is about maintenance and it's about prevention. But then, oh, that's that chart that I showed you earlier. I knew I had that in there someplace. So what are the self-care categories that you feel are most important for your functioning? And you can vote multiple ones of these if you want. There's no need to really vote all of them because that would just negate your vote. But which ones do you think are the most important for you to be a functional individual? We have very few people who want to put workplace at the most important. Totally understandable. Emotional definitely seems to be winning if this were a race. It's interesting that physical is more important than psychological for most. And different people are going to weigh these out differently. But it's important to be able to explore for yourself what is most important for your own functioning. And when I mentioned the word balance before about writing out a self-care plan, we need to make sure that a good self-care plan is going to involve all of these. And if you leave out relationships, or you leave out workplace because my relationships are doing just fine, or my workplace isn't a real stressor for me, well, you're going to be missing an opportunity to develop a good, well-rounded and balanced self-care plan? Good answers, a lot of good answers. Appreciate everyone responding. Now I'm going to ask you a different question. Of these 6 choices, the next question, which category do you struggle most with in your self-care? Ask yourself this question. Which category do you struggle the most with for your self-care? For some reason, this is giving numbers instead of percentages. I guess I missed that, but same proportions. And I'd be curious to ask the question. I'll ask this out loud, not really expecting an answer, but I wonder for how many of us in our 168 member group, how many of us is the most important one, the one you feel that is most important, also the one that you struggle the most with? Looks like workplace is getting a lot more attention with the category that people struggle the most with, getting a lot more attention. Fortunately, that emotional category that people said was or got the most votes in terms of people saying that it was the most important, fortunately, very few people feel like they struggle the most with. And again, these are self-insights. These are questions that we can ask ourselves, and hopefully in asking these questions, in having to answer these questions and come up with an answer, it's a good moment of self-examination for you. So we have self-soothing and reparative, restorative work, and that helps us get out of the dumps, right? And we have self-care, which helps us maintain and prevent. I'm going to go ahead and move forward on this. Thank you for your answers. And then there's resilience building. Resilience building is about building strength, is about being stronger. So remember, we had self-care to maintain. We have self-soothing, which helps us get out of that stressful trauma moment. Resilience helps us create a new baseline. Resilience helps us to be even stronger after the fact. Resilience helps me be stronger with my physical health, yeah, but my psychological health, my mental health, my emotional health, my spiritual health, my relationship health, and my workplace health. All of these things are ways that we can choose to have self-care, which is that maintenance and prevention. But resilience building, which I love to talk about, which we're going to talk about in a future session, resilience building helps us to increase and be stronger. And we're going to talk about that in future sessions that we're going to have. But these are all sorts of different ways to conceptualize what it means to exercise good self-care. So I can't not ask, because I love talking about resilience. Remember, resilience makes us stronger. I want to ask a general question for us. And this is our last word cloud to do as we come to the end of our time. What do you do to build your own resilience? Again, being stronger, not just maintaining, but being stronger. I realize we haven't operationalized resilience. We haven't defined resilience. But I just wanted to spitball this to leave you with this thought of what do you do to build that resilience? How would you put that into words? As people put their responses there, I would invite, again, if we have anybody who wants to ask a question or share an insight, you're welcome to raise your hand or unmute yourself. Prioritizing, children's triathlons, whew. Having hope, positive self-talk, creating mental distance, knowing your worth. I love that one. Always learning something new. That's great. I have a phrase that I say oftentimes, which is that I never want to be the smartest person in a room, because then I don't have anything to learn from the people around me. I always want to acknowledge my own ignorance and my own opportunities to learn. Saying no, making a plan. Writing down strengths, I think that says. Great answers. So be thinking about this topic of resilience. We're going to reflect back on this as we meet together over the next few months. I'm going to go ahead and move us forward in the slide. So we have our January challenge. Those of you who've done work with Cornell over the fall, engaged in some of these monthly challenges. And we're going to do it a little bit differently this time. Hopefully we'll pull it all together. But our January challenge, of course, is about this topic of self-care. And I look forward to seeing fun and funny things out of this. Think about all the things that we talked about self-care today. And I invite you to send pictures or stories to cornellchallenge@gmail.com. That you can send an email with pictures, with a story, with a situation, things like that. If you specifically want to be acknowledged that it's you, feel free to put that in there and label it. If you specifically want it to be shared anonymously, label that too. And we're going to pick some of them and share them at our next time or over the next month to be able to report that out. But I'd love to see some innovative, some fun pictures of what people are doing for self-care. Please try to keep them appropriate, but all sorts of different ways that we can engage in these self-care activities. And by sharing these, what you'll be doing is helping to inspire others. We'll have the opportunity to do that. So as Karen sends out reminder emails over the course of the next month, she will also send out reminders for you to do this. I would love it if we could get one submission from everyone on this call, in this workshop. And likewise, all the people who are going to be seeing this after the fact, people who are going to be watching this workshop, not with us today, but on their own time. I'd love to see a lot of responses to this. Again, it's an email address, cornellchallenge@gmail.com. Would love to get that response from folks. We're nearing the end of our time. Our future sessions, February, March, April, and May, are going to cover these topics. In February, we're going to talk about safety and resilience in a time of global crisis. That is just even so much more different than when we wrote this out back in October and November. In March, we're going to talk about teaching resilience. We're going to operationalize resilience for ourselves, but then talk about teaching it to others, whether that's as your role as a parent, as a caregiver, as a teacher, or in whatever profession you get to exercise that. But how do we help build resilience in others? April 8th is about being a behavior detective. It's going to be a little more focused on people who are parents and teachers, but anyone is welcome to join us for that one. But being a behavior detective and looking at the behavior of other people as communication. And in order to do that, we have to understand what they're saying, why they're saying it, and how we can respond to the need that's behind that behavior rather than just reacting to the behavior that we see. And that's part of putting on our detective hat and being a behavior detective. And then in May, we're going to talk about building organizational and community networks for resilience. Here in the state of Virginia, we have about 25 trauma-informed and resilient community networks around the state. And as I talked with Jeannie and others as we build out this plan, they were really excited about this idea. I know that you have your own ACEs network there in your area, and how we can operationalize that and maximize its impact, really leverage it for that impact. So we're going to be talking about that in May, but that organizational and community network, that could be something as simple as your classroom if you're a teacher, or your school, or your organization, your social service department, but also can be about connecting multiple organizations and entities to come together to focus on resilience. So that's what we're going to talk about over those future times. Again, that link there down at the bottom, childsavers.link/Cornell. And I'll put that in the chat as well, so you can click that. And Karen just put the survey in the chat as well. That survey is really important for you to go to. It'll be a little bit of an evaluation of what you learned from today, but it'll also be an evaluation of the workshop so that we can get good feedback. But at the end of that survey, you'll get a link to two things. One, you'll get information if you're an educator about how to get teacher credits for this, educator credits for this. And also, if you want a certificate of attendance, you need to go to that link too. And after you fill out the evaluation, you'll have a link to get you to the certificate of attendance. Karen put some other things there. The instructions for getting to the teaching credits are there in the chat. And I think that's the end of what I have to present, and that's the end of my time. I'm actually ending right on time, which is very rare for me. I almost always run over. But I'll stop talking and see if Karen or Jeannie or anybody else wants to say anything to close us out.
Yeah, it's been great to have everybody today learning together. Um, we definitely are interested in your feedback. So jump on the survey. Let us know, if this has been helpful to you. And if you have ideas for future webinar workshops, we'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for being with us today. Have a great day.